This is Show versus Business, where pop culture meets pop money with your host, the real Theo Harvey and Mr. Benja. Guess what, guys? Mr. Benja is not here today, so this will be a solo pod that we'll get into today. But Mr. Benja, we're missing you. Get back soon. Hey, everyone. So, look, I'm going to get into a special solo edition today where we're going to talk a little bit about the state of TV and movies. Yes. What is going on overall with TV shows and movies, especially around genre storytelling? I'm super excited to go into deep dive on this and give you guys a lay of the land. Overall, what I'm seeing right now is that movies right now are doing pretty terrible, right? If you don't know, the movie business is stuck. May was a bad month. I think it was only 3 billion. They're projecting it was the lowest May since 1995, right? When it in terms of revenue box office. And this is terrible, right? We had disasters like the Fall Guy that came out. We had what's it called? We had Mad Max, the Mad Max prequel, Furiosa, that didn't do well as well. So those are two big bets that just did not land at the box office at all. So May was terrible. So now we're in June. June is picking up a little bit. We'll talk about it in a second. But overall, movies, is that still a relevant thing? James, record this. Producer James, definitely, you want to make sure we clip this. And I want to ask the people, especially the Gen Zers, right? The millennials, right? Do you believe that movies are still a cultural driving force for us? Me and Mr. Benja, we talk about all the time. We're of an older, different generation. We grew up on movies, right? Obviously, Star Wars came in our lifetimes, and that was the advent of the big genre blockbuster movies, right? So we just remember going to movie theaters and being blown away by what we saw on the screen and being super excited about movies like The Matrix and Star Wars, Indiana Jones, and just over and over again, just being blown away by these type of movies. And movies are so big that the lexicon, certain terms and quotes became part of what we said. Game over, man. If you don't know where that's from, go look up aliens. But just things like that, man. Just quotes that just come on top of our head and references. It was all it was just awesome time to just talk about different things to get excited about movies, right? That were coming out and what we were going to see and just be touched by them. But I don't think that's the case anymore, right? There have been studies that shown that Gen Zers, millennials are spending more time on TikTok and YouTube than on any other type of media, right? And this includes Netflix. YouTube is by far being has more watch hours than any type of movie or TV show that you can imagine out there. And so it does seem like there's a shift going culturally, right? There, and not only that, but there's no such thing as a monolithic culture, right? We would go all see a movie or there was a hit TV show and everyone knew what it was about, right? And you would just go watch it and that was it. We'll talk about TVs in a second or TV shows in a second, but think about Game of Thrones. That was probably the last monolithic kind of culture or event from a television that we all watched at the same time. Even this prequel series, right? The Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon is not as monolithic as people hope it could be, right? Like Game of Thrones. But Game of Thrones was the last one that I think a lot of people sat and watched. But now it looks like culture and what people enjoy and watch is so niche down, right? So obviously you have shows. Some people just watch certain procedural shows. Some people watch just true crime. Some people watch genre storytelling. Me and Mr. Benja, but it's really broken down. So you only have these small little bubbles, and rarely do they mix together. Every once in a while, something just hits the zeitgeist and blows up like a Squid Game, but that's very rare and far in between. So I think movies are just not hitting that cultural zeitgeist as it used to, and other things are taking its place. And it's the fractured of the culture, right? Everyone's watching their own thing, have their own tribe that they discuss, but never do anyone mix. I can even tell in my family, my wife and I watch vastly different things. We try to connect on certain shows, but it's very hard. We try to at least get one show that we can watch together, but it's so hard. I'll watch a show and she'll watch a show, or we try to watch it together and maybe she watches ahead because I may fall asleep a little earlier than her. But those are the things that we're running up against when it comes to what are people watching and why are we just not seeing movies just take out. Also, I think the strike hurt them bad, right? There's just not a lot of good movies out there right now. What we're seeing is that The strike shut down for about 8 months. And this was an opportunity for streamers and studios to just cut budgets. And so now, when movies pick back up again, beginning of this year, really, you start to see things move a little bit slower. And so now a lot of content, movies and TV shows that we wanted to see got pushed back for a year, 6 months. And so we're just not seeing that great. And in that time, guess what? Other things took precedence, like TikTok, YouTube. And so people are like, I haven't seen a movie in a minute. I'm out of the habit. What does that even mean anymore? Going to a movie where I could just wait till it comes on streaming. Also, that also affected movies, right? Think about it. During the pandemic, we saw more movies streaming because we couldn't go to the theaters, right? And so that habit has basically been embedded into us. So now that's all we know, right? So sometimes a movie comes out, I even think about, do I really want to go out and see this movie, or can I wait until it comes out on streaming? Like, for instance, Man and Web. I heard bad reviews. I said, I think I'm going to sit this one out. And sure enough, came out pretty recently, and I watched it on Netflix. There it is. So you just wait enough time in most movies. And the thing is, there is no sense that you're going to miss something, right? Very rarely do we have that with movies anymore. The last year we had that big Barbenheimer event, right? And that became a kind of a FOMO moment, fear of missing out. That's very rare and far between, because movies, if they can't make it into an event, it's like there's no FOMO that's created. Recently, we had a movie that happened here in June. I think there was FOMO for it, but we'll discuss how that happened. But if you can't make your movie an event and fear of missing out, then you're not going to see people drive, get out of their houses to go see a movie and stand in line and do all that. That behavior is no longer a part of that process. So the strikes have hurt the inventory and quality of movies that people want to watch. Finally, AI is looming large, right? We talk about this all the time on this podcast about artificial intelligence and how it's going to reshape the entertainment business and all businesses, really. And we're seeing now that studios are thinking of ways to cut costs with Sora, the new OpenAI video tool, right? Sora, in fact, they just released a Toys R Us ad using AI video, right, to create this ad. And we're about to see more and more experimentation. Yes, there have been some pushback against AI being used to write things, or maybe create original content. But as we all know, that's just going to proliferate more and more. And we're going to see big tech dominate over time. Matter of fact, there was just an article not too long ago, the A24 indie darling, right? The house that created such hits like Hereditary and Everywhere, Everything, All at Once, that just won the Oscar a couple years back. They have into a relationship with OpenAI, right? Or excuse me, they got investment from a large capital VC fund called Thrive Capital. And Thrive Capital is one of the leading investors in OpenAI. And so we're going to see tons of experimentation with A24 and their movies using technology driven by OpenAI. So you're going to see more and more of this coming to Hollywood, and that's going to reshape what movies mean in the future. And like I said, they'll probably never go away, but I don't know if they'll be the same cultural forefront like I remember, like Mr.Benja remembers, right? And some of our listeners do remember just being super excited about the next movie that's coming out and want to see that. I, for one, still super excited about movies because it's the one place where we can shut things out, where we put our phone down and we just be transported, right? Kind of like those Nicole Kidman TV spots that you see right before the AMC movie. If you've ever been to AMC theaters recently, there is a right before the movie starts, there is a pre-commercial that gets you excited about going back to the movies, right? And so it's been, people have made fun of it, they did parodies of it, but it does get you a sense of how some people think about movies, right? You get transported, right, and to a magical place and really take your mind off your troubles for a couple of hours, right? That's how movies blew up in the 1920s, right? Think about what's happening in the 1920s. You had the Depression. People went and spent 15 cents to go watch a movie. Just take your mind off their troubles. And I think that still holds a place for my heart and some people's hearts. But unfortunately, it's just not there for some of the younger generation. Just don't know about it. Matter of fact, I can even look at my kids who are part of that generation alpha, that next right wave of younger folks. All they know is TikTok and Instagram and YouTube, right? And they see their characters on there. And some of the videos that they watch are faceless. So a lot of times all they know is the personalities by their voice. But now when we go watch a 2-hour movie or an hour and a half movie, sometimes they get a little restless and they're just looking around unless it's like really grabbing them. So it's tough. And so I think that's what movies are going against. TV, what's the state of the television business, right? I think television is still very healthy. Obviously, we talked about the streaming wars. We don't talk about that anymore because we all said that Netflix has won, right? Netflix is dominating. They're actually getting back licensed content. Now, previously, remember Disney and HBO and other people licensed their content to Netflix and was just starting out, and Netflix paid them good licensing fees, right? Millions of dollars in licensing fees to put their content from other studios on their platform. That was in the beginning days. But then came the big streaming wars where everyone said, well, we're just gonna create our own content. Disney obviously created Disney Plus, and then you had HBO Max, and then you had Paramount Plus. Everybody created it, but they realized that business sucked. And Netflix was only able to win it because they got in early. They spent a lot of money. I think at $1.7 billion in content a year to create their library of new original content. And so they had to because obviously the studios are trying to compete with them. So they were no longer licensing any content to Netflix. Well, we had the great Netflix correction in 2022, I think I want to say, when the stock market blew up on stock went down in the low hundreds at one time, and so Netflix had to retrench and said we're going for profitability, and so that's what they did. So they rechanged and they thought about how they're going to be profitable, and so they're the only streaming service that is now profitable. Everyone else that went down that path with Netflix, it's like Netflix came, waited to say, "Hey, come to the innovation." Everybody came to the party for innovation. And Netflix said, "Nah, this party sucks," and left. And so now everybody, the Disney's, the big studios, Paramount Plus, right? They were left with the bag of Viacom, right? Or Fox. They were left with the bag and said, "Oh, you know what? Streaming sucks and I can't afford this bill anymore." So now they're all in dire states. And so whereas Netflix stock, as I'm checking it as of now, 600, 674 a share price, right? It's increased phenomenally over the last 2 years. And so it goes to show you that you can't follow every trend and you have to be true to yourself. Yeah, they were, if you look at Netflix, they were down in the, let's see, the Great Correction. They were down to 190 in April 29th, 2022. They went, now they're up $669. So basically almost 246, threefold increase. You made 3 times your money if you invest in Netflix back in 2022 of April. So that goes to show you that this is something that Netflix is dominating. And so now it's going back to where it was before. So what's happening? Netflix is getting new content, original content from the studios again, and they're licensing it because the studios need money bad. So they say, "Hey, we'll license this to you. Please, Netflix, play us again in millions of dollars so we can pay off all this debt that we need to get or to create content to keep up with you on streaming." So it's a mess, right? But I say that to say there's still great. There's because even though content is slowing down, I think at one time peak TV, where they say is how much TV shows are being produced, was in the 600s. It's getting down to about 400, 300. So there's still a lot of television going out, but the strikes had slowed that down. And also the fact that a lot of the other studios just can't keep up with new original content like Netflix could. And so what's happening now is we still have a lot of great shows. And so that's a great thing. So there's a lot of great shows on TV, but what I'm seeing is still great shows. So people are binging or watching these shows and commenting, a lot of TV podcasters and all that. But I'm seeing some backlash on a lot of genre shows. We'll talk about that. But I think there was a great push for a lot of these shows are great and wonderful. But now we're in a situation where people are saying, you know what, these shows are just not as great as they used to be, or there is a sense of political correctness that people are trying to correct against, right? They accuse a show may be too woke, or there's a political angle that's entered into genre storytelling. This is crazy. This has never happened before, right? You have fans that push back against certain things about women, especially Disney, especially what Star Wars fandom, right? That can be a little toxic sometimes. Me and Mr.Benja have talked about that multiple times on this podcast. But what we're seeing now is we're seeing a proliferation, just all types of genre storytelling, just getting bashed and talked about, and just people are saying, "Hey, this is not something that we support because it's," and actively going review bombing a lot of these shows. And so it's a very interesting time. That's really going to change the narrative and get people on your side. I digress. So it's great content on television, right? It's still booming, but we're seeing backlash against great shows that have premiered. And then also some of the shows that we like long in the tooth. And so it's, can you maintain that momentum that got people excited about it? Or we have to wait till the next show. And so that's the state of what's happening with movies and television. So what I want to do is just talk a little bit, just more specific on each different type of pathway and what I'm seeing in the industry. And obviously, please comment, suggest new content that I haven't talked about, right? What movies are you watching? What TV shows are you watching? We would love to hear from you. We'd love to get a sense of what everyone's watching now so we can get a sense of what is great to talk about. So one of the things I want to discuss is the movies, right? Movie business. June is picking up a little bit, and that's because of one movie. Really, let's be honest. It's probably gonna be the first $1 billion movie that's being released here in 2024, and that is Inside Out 2. So Inside Out 2, Disney Pixar production. So what's happening strategy wise? Pixar, obviously, Disney talked about this, they are going all in remakes and sequels, right? And so Inside Out 2 was a big hit for them that came out in 2015. And then that they here it is, what, almost 10 years later, Inside Out 2 is here and it's been released. And it came out the gates hot. At one time, we didn't know how it was going to do. It was like one of those movies that could. I was interested in seeing it because I saw it with my daughter, the first one in 2015 when she was little. And so I wanted to see how they evolved the character and the emotions and how they talked about the emotions. Because it's told from the perspective of a young teenage girl and her emotions and all that. And I think that's a great way to talk about it and what's possible. And yeah, so Inside Out 2 hit the ground running. And I think what the thing was, I think initially it was, I think you could get shows and you could get watch the movie pretty easily. It wasn't like an Oppenheimer phenomenon. It wasn't a big event where people dressed up as Barbie or wore fedora hats for Oppenheimer, or the Gentle Minions where people dressed up. No, this is one of those things where people would say, okay, this is a great movie. Let's go check it out. And it blew out. It was like the first weekend, I think it had 200 million, right? Or 300 million worldwide. It achieved that first weekend. Second weekend, I think it was the first domestic have 100 million domestically, I think, since a movie did in over like 15 years. So basically, the second weekend, typically, you have a drop off in the box office anywhere between 50 and 60%, depending on the movie. The holdover is around 34, 35%. That means the revenue number didn't drop much. So that's phenomenal. And it made 100 million in the second weekend. That rarely happens. And so now, yes, as I'm reading this, it has ticked over $1 billion worldwide. And so first movie, congratulations, that hit $1 billion. And it was the fastest ever for an animated movie according to Deadline. And so this is phenomenal. So look, we got success there. So it looks like Pixar is back when you come to sequels, playing the hits. And Bob Iger talked about it on the Disney plans that we're going to have sequels from now until whenever. So Moana 2 think comes out later this year. That was a big hit for Disney a couple of years back, and back in what, 2016. Looks like we're going to get a lot of animated sequels, and it just is what it is. And that's unfortunate if you like original content. Frozen 3 is coming out. This is where we're going to see movies go, right, for foreseeable future. And this is not, it's not nothing usual, right? We've seen this before. And also we're also seeing sequels or prequels. Mufasa is coming out, which is a prequel to the uh Lion King live action remake. So we're seeing prequels to the remakes of original content. So it's just, they're gonna find a way to mix IP any way they can to give you the same stuff, but just a different angle. And which some people may get upset with that, but it is what it is. Hollywood is a tale as old as time. One of the things, movies that's big anticipation for this summer, I think it comes out late July though, July 25th, which is unfortunately a lot of times when the kids are going back to school in August, but it is what it is. I think that got delayed because of the strike. It's Deadpool and Wolverine. Huge anticipation. That's probably the next $1 billion movie that comes out. And why is that? Because it's R-rated movie. Obviously, Deadpool 1 and 2 did phenomenally well as R-rated storytelling, but now this is the first kind of Fox property that will be under the MCU brand, and they're making fun of that. If you watch any of the trailers from Reynolds and what he's saying as Deadpool, right? They're making fun of Kevin Feige and the MCU. You have Wolverine in there, so there's big rumors that it's gonna be a lot of cameos of the X-Men, and so we're gonna see the X-Men probably uh, enter the MCU properly through this movie, which is going to be a profane R-rated movie, which is crazy. So the first one that's really in the MCU. So yeah, huge anticipation for this one. So those are going to be the $2 billion movies, but far cry from what happened in 2019. I think we had 7 billion dollar movies in revenue. Basically, they made box offers of $1 billion worldwide across the world. And so very rare to have that happen. And so we're going to see more of that. We're not going to see as much as that. Two so far, maybe millions get close to a billion. We'll see millions, minions. This is a franchise has been around forever. They had that big blow up a couple years back, or that was the Minions. This is the this is another franchise, weird franchise. So they actually have two that go at the same time from the same concept. One's just Minions about those cute little guys that just go around with the yellow heads, and then they have Despicable Me, which is the main story about Gru and who is the villain, and he's really but now a hero. So they're continuing that storyline where they have this other thing keep going. So it's gonna be so they really have two different shows. One is like a spinoff of the original franchise, and they both generate close to $1 billion every time they get released. Crazy times we live in. But yeah, that'll probably be close to a billion. Mufasa, we'll see how that does. I think The Lion King did hit a billion when it came out. That was the one with Beyonce and Donald Glover. That was the reality. That was the remake that was live action. It was animated, right? But looked like live action, if you remember. But yeah, so they're gonna do a prequel. I wonder if they're gonna do something like Godfather 2. If you don't know what happened in Godfather 2, very fascinating. So see, a lot of this stuff is history. When Godfather 1 came out, great movie, everybody loved it. So the sequel is gonna come out. Right? So, what's this gonna be about? So it is a sequel in the true serious sense of the word. If you don't know the story of Godfather, the story of Michael Corleone. He's the next generation. He's taken over the family business, which is crime, in the sequel, and he's continuing to the future, right? So he's getting in with senators, he's getting in gambling, he's trying to expand it beyond just that small empire that he had that was given to him from his dad. But at the same time, they do a prequel at the same time where they show how his dad started when he came first to America from Sicily, played by Robert De Niro, right? And so that was all in Italian, number one, but it was fascinating. So you had Robert De Niro playing the young Vito Corleone, right? And his come up in New York and building his empire, while at the same time he shows his son Michael doing the same thing, pushing the family to the future. And they juxtapose those two type of stories. Fascinating. Francis Ford Coppola, man, genius guy, and he's got some interesting movies coming out. Megatropolis, I think that's what it's called. It's going to be his next big movie. So we'll see how that does. It's very weird, but there's been some stories about it. But Francis Ford Coppola, I mean, he's a genius for a reason. But anyway, Godfather 2, I say that is because if they do something like that with Mufasa, they'll have a prequel where they show Mufasa starting the pride and doing what he does in the past, while at the same time they push Simba's story forward. Because when you look at the trailer, they even say Beyonce and Donald Glover will prize their roles as Simba and Naya. I think it's Naya in the live action. So I'll be curious to see if they do something like that, like a Godfather 2 kind of story. That'd be cool. So anyway, I digress, but just go to show you that it looks like the movies that are going to do well are going to be genre and animated type shows and family shows, right? Movies, right? I just don't see anything else getting close to a billion, and that's sad, right? And because we all know MCU is hurting. Deadpool and Wolverine is technically MCU movie, but I don't know if it's as big of an MCU movie that we think, or it's not. It's technically MCU movie, but it's really coming from Fox and under the new banner of X-Men that's coming out. So it's gonna be interesting to see what happens there. So anyway, so are you excited about any of these movies? What are your thoughts? Be curious to get your take if you're listening of what we can see and what's happening in the movies coming in the future. But like I said, I again, my overview of movies, like I talked about before, don't have big hope for it. You may have a few billion-dollar movies that pop up based on genre. If we can get the movie business excited, people get excited and make it more events again. So I'm hoping that Hollywood's thinking through that. Like Hollywood's lasted for 100 years for a reason, right? It's always found a way to stay relevant when TV and cable and everything evolved over time. They still constantly found ways to stay relevant. So there could be a pathway here. So more to come, but like I said, for the foreseeable future, I do see movies being because of the because of it's such a long form type of content. But I don't know. Things it's a pendulum, right? I think I saw something. Bill Maher had said something that for the first time, what they called Gen Zers, right, are looking to they're putting down the dating app. So they want to meet more in face to face like we used to. And then also there's some studies that show there's a lack of trust in that generation, Gen Zers, right? And so maybe because they grew up, they're digital uh natives, that's all they know the proliferation of lies and AI coming about and scams and all that over the internet, I think more and catfishing, things like that. People are realizing that, you know what, in person, face to face interactions, going to an event, those are real experiences that you can't replicate online. So I want more of that. So I'd be curious to see if Gen Z does swing the pendulum back toward more live events, more events in person, like the movies. Because, like I said, there is some green shoots where we're seeing them stepping away from the dating apps more and getting to trying to meet people in person. And meet in person means going to dates, and dates mean going to the movies and going to dinner. So anyway, like I said, this is interesting time we live in, and people are people. So technology can change, but people are people. So we'll see if how movies evolve over the next couple of years. All right, let's pivot over to television. So a lot of things to cover here. Right now, it's a great time to be a television watcher. There's a lot of shows on. Like we had a Darth, I told Mr. Benja, I started watching old episodes of the Big Bang Theory because there was literally nothing on in May. Yeah, yes, the sport. Even sports was down. I'm a basketball fan. It was all the finals was not compelling at all with Celtics versus Dallas. It was pretty much a sweep. I mean, the yeah, so it was like basketball season petered out after the first and second rounds. Not really compelling storylines. There's some great storylines in WNBA, but like I said, if you're a sports watcher, you really not a lot. Hockey went to game 7. That was pretty interesting. Congrats to the Edmonton Oilers, right? If you're a hockey fan. But yeah, I'm just trying to think. It was really nothing too compelling, right, from a sports standpoint to drive our attention. Obviously, we're going to have the Olympics in August, so that should be a fun time, but it's the Olympics. So it's just so much content. You just obligated to watch all of it. But like for June, there's really a lot to watch. So, like I said, I was watching old episodes of the Big Bang Theory, just like reminiscing and thinking how the show evolved and all that because there was nothing to watch. But now we're in June, and so it's been proliferation of a lot of stuff. And so one of the first things, so I talked about sports. There's a new Hulu series called Clipped, which is about that weird time that happened with the Donald Sterling was the owner of the Clippers. He got recorded by a young lady on her phone, and he said some basically racist things. And because of that, the NBA came hard on him and basically made him give up his franchise and sell it. And that's how we had Steve Ballmer take over the Clippers. Weird, interesting time that happened. And I forgot that happened. Wow, that time frame. I think that time frame happened. I can't remember it. It happened so long ago, like 2013, 2014, like 10 years ago. It seemed like it was almost yesterday. So that was the beginning, obviously, of internet culture. Internet culture was here, but just really individuals like this V. Stiviano character that just came into the consciousness and people trying to be famous for being famous, obviously, shifted away from reality show to more on the internet. Memes became big. But yeah, Clip is telling that story of the Clippers and how they dealt with that firestorm that happened at the same time they were trying to win the championship, which spoiler alert, they did not. Oh, bless the Clippers, man. I'm a Laker fan, but I always my heart goes out to Clippers. They tried so hard. They had a great team. Blake Griffin, Chris Paul. Yeah, they just Jay Reddick, who's now the coach of the Lakers. So yeah, it's interesting show. Uneven a little bit, but there's some real truth moments, especially around race and sexism and just how billionaires treat. So it's got a lot of good elements in it. I see why they wanted to make a TV show. I just don't see a lot of people talking about it, but great show. Next one we'll talk about real quick, The Boys. So yeah, season 4 is here. And yeah, so this is what I'm talking about. There's been some backlash on The Boys, right? Because Eric Kripke, the showrunner of The Boys, and Mr. Benja and I talked in on previous podcasts, that guess what? He has really said that this show is about the Trump administration, right? Where Homelander is basically, if not out and out allegory or basically a stand in for Trump. He's Trump a dictator. authoritarian who wants his way and he can get away with anything almost. And so he pretty much said this is what the show's about. And so now that he put that out there on Front Street, if you watch any hours of the boys, as a matter of fact, I went back even to the first season, first couple episodes of the first season. It's always there, guys. It wasn't like it was hidden. So it's like it was always there. It's just when the showrunner comes out and said, this is what it's about, that's when it became a mess. So now you have a lot of these political commentators get in and say the boys suck, it's not what it was, and all this stuff. And because I think for some reason, it's just like they're drawn to attention, right? You have wherever people's eyeballs are, that's where you're going to see people put their opinion out there and get in there, as opposed to everyone just generally like it. And I think that's what we're seeing with genre storytelling now. We're seeing the political folks, and obviously this is an election year, so we're going to see things get a little bit more politicized for whatever reason. And so anytime anybody says anything against or for certain individuals in the political spectrum, then you're going to see some backlash or what's going on there. And so that's what we're seeing. And so it's a crazy time, I think. And you know what? And I think that's a good point. I think it's because this is 2024 and everything's getting politicized. Mr.Benja and I talked at the Juneteenth episode about Reggie Jackson talking about the racism he experienced. And that was politicized. I saw on the left, someone was just like, this is why Make America was, never really great, because look at what Reggie Jackson said. It's okay, guys. Look, you don't have to politicize everything, but that's exactly what was done. And so this is like anytime anyone says anything, right, you're going to see the left and the right comment on it, trying to sway people one way or the other. And so I think genre storytelling is just another playground for the political folks to get in there and push agendas forward. And so we'll see. Hopefully in 2025, we won't see this as bad, because the political spectrum, political circuits would not be as large anymore, right? Because we're not going to see as many people. We probably won't see as many politicos out there talking talk or whatever, trying to draw eyeballs. But anyway, The Boys is, if you don't know, The Boys is a series about if people had these superpowers, but they act like humans, right? And they're basically not heroes. They're just human beings and do whatever they want because they're celebrities and they feel like they're entitled to things. And so now we have this story that just tells the pravity that they get into. And it's very rated R show if you've never seen it before. So I would say this. I would say it's still a decent show. I think it's just long in the tooth, right? Because like I said, I went back to the first episodes, and this is exactly the same show. It really hasn't changed. Sometimes you can tell, did the show change? Did I change? But this is exactly the same show it's always been, right? And so it's not like it's changed too much. I think maybe I've changed is just, okay, it's becoming repetitive, right? There's really nothing driving the story forward. And to their credit, they have already said that next season 5 will be the last one. But I'm still enjoying it just to see what is awesomely they're going to do about the main character, Homelander, who is that Trump analog, if you will, a Trump allegory, if you will, and see how they built him up. But the guy's playing Anthony Starr, phenomenal portrayal, play a homicidal maniac and still have empathy for him. That takes some good acting, guys. And so it's definitely kudos to him, all the great work that he's doing there with that character and great cast. But I do feel it's getting long in it too. The next show, The Acolyte. So look, Star Wars, The Acolyte, I think it came in, people ready to, push it down. I think just Star Wars in general, man, it's just like, I don't know what's going on with the fandom, man. It's just, you can't get right. Movie, I can't remember the movie right now. I think it was Eddie Murphy. I think it was Life, just can't get right. There's just, or was it Harlem Nights with Eddie Murphy? But there was a character just couldn't do right. And I think no matter what the Star Wars did, they hit out the park. Look, amazingly with Mandalorian out the box with a streaming show that just blew up, and that helped Disney Plus. That was the first TV show on Disney Plus, really. And so kudos to them. Mandalorian came out the box. Baby Yoda became a thing, right? And it's so surprised Disney. They didn't, for first time ever, they didn't have any friends. They didn't have any licensed type of, they didn't have any toys or anything. I think the Mandalorian came in fall that year. They didn't have any toys or anything ready. That's how they thought the Mandalorian was going to be. But blew up and everybody loved it. Mandalorian kind of went down in quality over time. Then we had a couple other shows that premiered. Unfortunately, I have them in the background, but the Obi-Wan show just disappointed, even though they brought back our fan favorites. You had Ewan McGregor, you had Hayden Christensen, who's gotten better probably since the prequels. Everybody's giving him his pass now. At the time of the prequels, pretty bad acting. Go look at Clone Wars, right? Prequel episode 2, Clone Wars, man. Yeah, not good acting, but him and Natalie Portman talking about love. But He's gotten better over the years, and so he came back, reprised his role as Vader. And man, I guess people just weren't feeling it, man. And that wasn't received well. We had the Ashoka show, which is basically under the new regime, which is Dave Filoni, who is the guy that's engineering Clone Wars and all that stuff. He's building all this backstory, right? That just left in more lore into what it means to be a Jedi and different type of Jedi, gray Jedi, and be able to access hyperspace whales, the purple, and all this other stuff, right? He's bringing that into Star Wars. That kind of got poo-pooed, right? It was a beloved TV show cartoon, which was the Rebels series. Matter of fact, it was good. I watched it, and I'm not a fan of the Clone Wars television show. I did like the Bad Batch. I might get back into it with my kids, but I did watch the Rebels, and based on Mr.Benja's recommendation and Dr. Chris. But yeah, man, I was impressed. So I said, okay, I'm going to Ashoka, so I'm going to check it out. Yeah, just okay, just mid. Nothing earth shattering, unfortunately. And I think people were disappointed with that. Andor, phenomenal, right? But the ratings were good. Definitely more. Andor is a story of basically before Rogue War, right? Rogue One, excuse me, which is phenomenal. If you've ever seen that show, that movie, phenomenal movie, because it's basically Dirty Dozen Star Wars, right? Just think about it, just Star Wars Dirty Dozen, right? Here's some criminals, they got something to do. It's a suicide mission. Andor tells the prequel of that, right? The TV show that leads up to Rogue One, which is phenomenal. So it's like nuts and bolts of how this empire is really working and what does it mean to be a rebel in the empire. And so it's pretty phenomenal show. So definitely Mandalorian first season, Andor, some hits. But everything else just mid. And so now here we have the Acolyte coming into this situation. I was super excited about Acolyte. I got into a little bit of the what they call the legends, which is like was years, 100 years in the past when the Jedi were dominating with thousands of Jedi and what it was like to be a part of Jedi Council. Obviously, a lot of that stuff got pushed on the rug, and they just say, okay, that's not canon anymore. But now they started to bring that stuff back, and I've been just even with Admiral Thrawn, he's coming back from Rebels. That was a big thing that was pushed under the radar before they brought it back. So slowly but sure, they're bringing back a lot of these old stories and thoughts. And so now here we have what was it like to be a Jedi and during the High Council dominance and what that looks like. And so here we are. We have this 100 years or so before the prequels, and you got these Jedi's out here becoming armed forces and doing what they do, cop investigation. Pretty cool concept. And Amandla, you talked about her, Stingberg, and I liked her back in the day from the Hunger Games. She's controversial too. And so I think that's what kind of was put on the red flag, right? Controversy because of who was in it and not what the story was about. And then there was rumors that there was this witch coven and they're changing up the story of Star Wars and all this stuff. And if you watch it, you understand what they're trying to do with it. I don't think, and so I think the politicos got in there and are trying to politicize things when it doesn't need to be there. But there's hate coming for this genre storytelling. It's tales all the time. Like we talk about the boys. And I'll this time, unlike the boys, I don't think the showrunner actually put themselves in that space to do that. But Leslie Headland, she's a lesbian. She has very strong views, but she did some great shows. If regardless, and she did the Russian, what's it called? The Russian Doll. If you've never seen it on Netflix, great show. So she was a Star Wars fan, said, I want to do this. And kudos to Disney. They gave her a chance to put something out there. But I think the fans are just not getting a lot of the other fans, right? The ones who are a little bit more political are not given a fair shot. And I think that's fair, right? They're criticizing things like, oh, why is there fire in space? Let's just come on, guys. Let's just calm down. It's fantasy, man. Star Wars has never been about hard science. Let's be honest. And so here they're just criticizing every little thing about it. Why they have their twin who grew up 20 years apart, but they have the exact same hairstyle. So that's when you see criticisms like that. You're just looking at things to criticize the show. I like the show. I think it has some interesting points to tell, but I do feel like it's mid, right? There's something missing there. I think they need to figure out what's the driving force for this. And I think I get it. I'm going to wait till it sticks its landing and see, but I think there is a theme around who gets the right to practice the force that they see fit. And that's why the Jedi are not as perfect as we think they are, and which I think is an interesting concept. Where some people Jedi are sacrosanct, you can't talk about them, you can't be bad. They're basically priests, and you can't talk about them. But come on, I think there has to be nuance, right? And I think that's what they're trying to say in this series. Maybe a little clumsily, but hey, look, let's figure it out. Let's see. And it's definitely trying to do more with humor and some other stuff that I feel like Dave Filoni is lacking a little bit in his shows a little bit. And so I like so Andor is run by a different showrunner. The Acolyte is run by a different showrunner, but then Mandalorian and then Shoka is run by Dave Filoni. I think Dave Filoni stuff, I don't know, it jaws a little bit too nerdish to me, right? Too kind of insular. Whereas I think Andor and even this is a little bit more open. And I think that's something I'm interested in, having more creators come in, building their vision. Let's not maybe have it just be dominated by what Dave Filoni thinks is best for Star Wars. And so I think that's encouraging. But we'll see where Ashoka goes. But it's just sad. A couple of shows. Let's get into it. Hot D. Got Hot D. Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon, season 2, right? So this is out now. So I think that the challenge with Game of Thrones, just like the original, is just a lot of homework, right? You got to know who Daenerys is, Daemon, and how they're related, and Targaryens, and then you have to understand the sea snake and what he's about. Then you have to, which is great. I think a lot of people did the research. I read the books, right? I didn't read I didn't read the House of the Dragon tome, and for whatever reason, it's basically it's just basically a history book, right? For Game of Thrones. George R. Martin, phenomenal guy. He created a whole world, all the way down to religions, to different species, to different foods, and look, kudos to him. And people want to be immersed in that world. I get it, but it's becoming like homework, right? So Game of Thrones, I think what made it popular to me and made me become a book reader was just that phenomenal first episode. If you never seen it, you got right away who the character was, and they left with a cliffhanger. And then I was like, man, what is this? And then it subverted your expectation of all the different archetypes of what a fantasy story is about. When I heard about HBO originally creating Game of Thrones, I was like, I don't know if I want to watch a fantasy show on HBO. But when I first saw that first episode, and then if you haven't seen it, I'm not going to spoil it too much, but things that you think were going to happen did not happen that way. And then you read the book, and it's exactly the same way. Matter of fact, the first episode pretty much mirrors the ending of the first chapter in the book, and it's phenomenal. And so I was like, okay. So literally, when I first episode, I was like, oh, I'm in this, and that's how But I just don't feel the same with Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon. There's really no kind of, because you're basically focused on one family, really, the Targaryens, right, and their fall. But there's no surprising characters. There's no twist of fate. There's no kind of subverting your expectations. And then also, there's really no characters. They're all terrible, right? There's no Tyrion, Jon Snow, the people that, like, yes, some people are good, and good people sometimes don't work out well for them. But at least always Game of Thrones, the original, always had a couple of characters that you knew, okay, they were gonna do something great. And matter of fact, they subverted that expectation, right? With a good character. He ended up dying, but then they subverted that too. And so I thought that Game of Thrones, definitely the original, was great. House of Dragon, not so much, right? They're trying to make up for it. But the other challenge is too, they're saying this is something we're gonna see dragon against dragon. They're talking about all these different dragons and Baron and all this. And you're like, oh, I'm ready to see that. Man, let's get to the dragons. Let's get to these dragon fights. And I think it's just, you know, way too slow. And I get it. Dragons probably expensive, but it's a lot of dragging out and trying to get excited about small little things. If you're a book reader, yes, who's lived with these characters for 20, 30, 20 years or so, fine. But for casual watchers like myself at this point, I think it's like homework. And I think, let's be honest, I think a lot of people are pushing it up because, look, they got a lot of views. A lot of people became famous as recappers of Game of Thrones and explain to you why this is Daenerys and this is Rhaenyra and this is how they're related and this is Damien and this is who he's related to and this is about the crab guy. And it's they get off on that and they got the views because all of us, I gotta go and watch the reviews too, saying what I missed and who they're related to and all that, to even make sense of the story. And so, should entertainment be like that? I don't know, but that's how Game of Thrones is, and so it is what it is. And look, if you love that kind of stuff, great. And like I said, the story is compelling. I'm gonna keep watching it. I think the acting is phenomenal. It's always great when you get these actors in the room when they're telling their story, and you feel their pains and get into the raw part of it. But then the first episode had a scene about, which was like a Sophie choice. If you've never seen that movie, a mother has to make a bad choice about our kids, right? Which one does what? And without spoiling it, but it was this big thing called Blood and Cheese in the books. And everybody's like, oh, I can't wait to see how this works. But I don't think it worked as well because it's like you had to for all this stuff. And they didn't really get into the characterizations of why it was important for everybody. And so that's something I was curious about. And I was hoping that they can do more with that. So, like I said, that's made too. So, like I said, so anyway, the other two shows I'll talk about briefly: Presume Innocent, Apple TV show, Jake Gyllenhaal, basic what law show with it's a remake of a movie with Harrison Ford from back in the day. It got good reviews. A lot of people raved about it. I can see why, because it's great acting and all that, but I just can't get around the idiot main character played by Jake Gyllenhaal and the stuff he does that's stupid. So maybe it's just my personal issues. I think it's very well done, and we'll see where it goes. Almost makes me want to skip the TV show and just watch the movie to get to some of the twists. I've heard there's some twist in it. So anyway, but check it out. It's week by week, so I haven't seen all of it yet. So but most of these shows actually are week by week up. But this last show that we're talking about is The Bear. So The Bear exploded on the scene 2 years ago about a small family run restaurant run by the main character Carmi, and he is a culinary chef trained by the best, but he comes back to his old family restaurant after a tragedy hits. And phenomenal show, right? They just capture that frantic energy of being a restaurant, running a restaurant business. And but so first season was great, second season phenomenal, and they go dive into the characters' backstories, all the different his shoe chef, which is the second in charge, Sydney, and she's doing a great job. And then obviously his cousin Richie, and so the drama that he's dealing with, and so it just goes into the backstories of the characters and what drives them to want to just be in the restaurant business, which we all know is a shitty business. And season 3 came out, still enjoying it. I'm fascinated by it, some of the things that they do with the storytelling. But it's getting some backlash. A lot of people pushing back and just saying it's not as good as it used to be. And I think that's just the nature of business, right? They're trying new things, they're trying to expand the storyline. Interesting. They do it almost every year. I don't know how they film it so fast. And they do it and there's one guy, Christopher Storer, I think that's the name of the showrunner. And uh, they do it every year, and they drop it as a binge, and so it's crazy. It's a phenomenal show. I don't know how they do all that, but then you watch it, and you're like, "Oh, man, they put a lot of energy." Some of the writing is great, phenomenal. So I still like it. I think it's really about artists, right, and the pain they go through, right? But now the artist being a chef, right? And they even have a scene, at the end of the season where all these famous chefs, real life chefs, are there talking about what drives them, right? And it has snippets, right? Obviously, some are connected by their family, right? Some are connected to the bigger sense that they're bringing people together. So, to me, that's fascinating, right? Just to see, and I know a lot of folks who are foodies realize that, but just the importance of food in our culture and what it means and what it means to be a chef, and more importantly, a celebrity chef, right? Or a chef at the highest caliber that people seek out. And I think that's fascinating to me to watch that. When you're best at something, what does that mean? And what do you give up for that? And Carm played wonderful by Jeremy Allen White, who kudos to him. Remember him from Lip in back in the day. And I really loved his portrayal in that show. And I thought it was phenomenal of all the different things. Shameless. Yeah, Shameless. I watched him. I always thought he was a fascinating character in Shameless, the smartest of the family brood. And I was like, oh, that guy's going somewhere. And sure enough, he's now got Emmy and all that. He's doing wonderful stuff. So great kudos to them. So we'll see where this show goes. Look, I can go forever because it's like basically about life and family and running a business and being an artist and what does it mean to strive to be the best and dealing with trauma and all that kind of stuff. So we'll see. It was one of those shows that I think people love. It just comes out so fast and so quick. Once a year, pretty much to the dime since 2022, third season. And it's a binge. Crazy. But Backlash, I think people are fed up on it. Guys, look, I talked a lot. I've been amazed about all the great TV shows and movies. So look, in the comments, let us know what you're liking, what you're feeling, what entices you to want to watch shows and movies right now. And we'll share in the comments and reach out to you and say, hey, tell us more because I would love to talk more about this on the podcast and see how they relate. The show part relates to business, right? Understanding where the business of these are going, right, for the future. What does that mean for entertainment? And like I said, it's going to be interesting next second half of this year to see all this and how it's going to shape out. But guess what? Me and Mr. Benja, we're going to be here every step of the way, checking out all the different ways of how the show side of business comes out and the business becomes more of a show with the gurus and all that and AI and all that. So more to come, guys. So look, I hope you guys like this solo edition. Give me a shout out. But like I said, Mr. Benja will be back next week So hope you enjoyed it. Look, please subscribe and comment at Show versus Business on X, YouTube, and Instagram. Listen to us at Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Go visit us on our website, Show versus Business, and put in your information and find out more about how you can run a podcast yourself. But everyone, thank you for your time. Have a great one. And as Mr. Benja would say, peace.